Okay, so welcome to the Node.js Technical Steering Committee meeting for March 20th, 2024. We got a little bit of a late start, but we will move over to the agenda as listed in the issue, which was issue number 1519. Before we dive into that, does anybody have any announcements they'd like to share?
Did you all sign up for the Collaborator Summit next in the next couple of weeks? If you haven't, please sign up. Okay, you will need to sign up before you can enter that building. So this is your friendly reminder to sign up and compile your and put your details in here. If you're not coming, I'm so sorry. We'll try to organize an agenda and we'll fit all of you in there remotely in case it's for the stuff that's needed.
Right, it doesn't, you don't need to sign up if you're
No,
going to attend remotely, right? Yeah.
no. If you are planning to attend remotely, please put your name in the sessions, okay? So that when we plan the agenda, we know your name and time zone, please. Okay, so if you do that, that will make it the scheduling a little bit easier for us. Thank you.
Okay, any other announcements? Okay, if not, we'll move on to the CPC and board meeting updates. I guess, Matteo, anything to report on that front?
And there is actually a very interesting news. Okay, I have something to report. Okay, they are going to align all the directors' term. So saying it in another way, all the 3 CPC director seats, as well as some few others, will be elected at the same time instead of being staggered across the year. Therefore, simplifying some of the management, but this means that my term as a board member is over, and there will be an election for the next one.
Okay.
So
if anybody's interested, I guess you're saying heads up.
They will probably be open. It is more for CPC members, for CPC regular members. But again, it's I personally plan to run again. But if other people are willing to serve, please do. Okay, it's fun.
Sounds good. Any other announcements?
Nope.
Or sorry, not announcements. That word has been okay. So if no more board or meeting updates, we then agreed to sort of tackle all of the issues which were not 4-pack related first, see if we can make progress on those. Reserve some time to come back to them at the end, and we also are reserving a bit of time for the private session at the end. So I'm going to go through and look at the ones that on the list. The first one that I would say we should dive into then is globally installing NPM. So globally installing NPM should not be the recommended way for Mac and Linux. I'm just seeing who opened that or tagged it. So Matteo, you opened that.
Yeah, I did. I did. So okay. This goes back to the starting point of NPM. Okay, and the fact that especially if you install npm, Node and npm via a package manager, okay, or anything that needs to be globally installed, it put it on Mac, like Homebrew or our package or the package that you can download for Mac. Then everything that you do with npm, any operation that you do for npm, if you want to install a global script, you need to install it with sudo. This is it. This is your.
Right.
This is a known problem for. This is a known problem for most people, because most of people that I know use either NVM or Volta or whatever to manage the version, okay, of Node.js in their system. Also because we need to switch versions all the time. Like I change version of Node, I don't know, 100 times a day. If most of the time, 100 times probably excessive, but 2-3 times a day I switch version of Node because for various reasons. So ultimately, people will do sudo npm install-g or sudo npm i. And in my experience, if I've done a workshop in a room with 100 people, a few of them, quite a few of them, will have a botched node installation that requires sudo, and basically creating all sort of security risks for them, essentially. This is not a problem of npm, to be honest, because it's it's not a problem of npm, but it's a problem of our distribution for Mac and Linux.
I see Jeffrey had his hand up first.
Yeah, I was just gonna say the package maintenance team is looking into exactly these types of things, like the question of, do we want to ship a version manager in our distribution, or do we want to recommend one, or do we want to update our install instructions on the website to have the primary recommendation to be via version manager, blah blah blah. Rather than this be like handled by the TSC, could we maybe like kick this to that team and ask them to investigate the options and come up with a recommendation?
I don't know, Matteo, your thoughts on that? I'll just let you answer before going to next person with their hand up.
I like that idea.
Keep going. I mostly recommend the problem, flag the problem of our Node.js website. Do not suggest people to do the right thing for them. Okay. Minus that, there are infinite solutions.
I think the thing is we have to figure out what we do want to recommend. So that feels like something that maybe that team can figure out.
I'm pushing it out. Okay. I'm just saying that the default one is not the right thing. Okay. At least for me. And we are doing a misservice to the community telling people to do that. Okay. So
I had my hand up next, so I'm gonna the title says NPM versus Node, but you talk about Node, so I think it's Node that you're talking about global installs.
It's the same. So when you install in our distribution, in our package or our binaries, we bundle both Node and NPM together. Okay. And Node has no problems to be installed globally in that way. But NPM creates this problem on the
I don't think you like depending on where, like in the distros, because NPM is installed in the system. Like I know, like for RHEL, the recommended way is to DNF install. You get a global version. That doesn't require you to use sudo to install your packages.
It does.
No, I do it all the time. Like I understand your point about switching versions and all that. That's a different issue. Anyway, I just wanted to clarify whether you meant
I would really want to see the settings that you have, because I literally have seen it happen for not for Fedora system, because once you do the sudo, if you need to install something with globally for whatever reason, okay, with npm ig whatever, then it kind of pollutes your .npm cache with permissions. And
so we talked about global installs. I don't do global installs.
But it's a feature of npm. So that's the problem.
Anyway, if I can come in, it's not necessarily even global installs. It is, I would say even more specifically, it's that the .pkg installer on Mac by default installs to user local. That's the actual problem. And user local is owned by, and it's installed with admin permissions. And so then your Node and NPM both have admin permissions. And then because of that, it causes permission issues. One thing I wanted to raise that I think this is to Jeffrey and to kick it off, I think to the package maintenance group. There was an effort previously to looking into basically making a net new node installer. That effort paused, but the idea there was to have this mix of like a version management and installer, build it maybe with Electron and allow it to be platform independent so it could work across, Linux and Windows and Mac. Both the Windows and Mac installers are a point of grief, frustration, and just I don't know, Zalgo, frankly, like it is brutal and they're really hard to maintain. And if I recall correctly, the macOS installer is specifically relying on like deprecated tech. So it's like we're, an OS update away from that just not working. I think this does pair into other conversations about what could and should ship with Node. I like looking at Rust, and the Rust Up toolchain is a great example of like a platform shipping, kind of like a kitchen sink solution here. But I do like the idea of further exploring like maybe both a command line utility as well as a UI that sits on top of it for those that need that kind of interface, as a way to distribute, install, and manage node and package managers and whatever you need for a tool chain on your system. I think we also talked about perhaps formalizing metadata that could be in repos for pinning versions or pinning package managers or whatever you wanted to do, and trying to get like FNM and NVM and all those other partners kind of like aligned or at least supporting.
Yeah, I'll just add to the discussion we did have in the package maintenance meeting next time was we really should come up with our vision of what it should look like. And like, because I'm from my perspective, maybe the answer is like Node doesn't need to do anything, but there's some other tool which installs Node dependencies, helps you switch between them all, but that doesn't mean it's packaged into Node, right? But like, I'm sure there's people who have different perspectives. And so that was what we discussed there as like a next step, is trying to come up with that vision. I think here it sounds like the suggestion Jeffrey made was like, let's kick it over to the package maintenance team. And I think, for here, it would be like, do we generally agree with that, or should we, propose something else? Matteo, had your hand up?
I am very happy to do a session with a separate group explaining the problems, okay? That our current recommended systems do not fit with how most teams use this. I was I don't know. I have lived this problem for like, I don't know, 8 years, 10 years or something. So I'm especially when doing courses, teaching newbies, it happens everywhere. Okay, so I don't know. I'm not know how many of you are familiar with it. A few of you, yes, because we work together on them as colleagues. So but again, I'm very happy to talk to anybody about this problem if we decided to delegate it to a different solution or do a deep dive in the next 10 or something. I think we should do something in the short term and something in the long term, and try to at least not tell people the wrong thing, okay? Especially on Mac. This is such a big problem on Mac that it's gigantic, okay? So you should not be using any of those things on Mac. Just use NVM. That's the only thing that set up your system correctly. And this is the otherwise you can be in a wall of trouble, essentially.
Miles has his hand up.
Yeah, just really quickly, and then I'll drop it. But like a short-term solution here would be changing the Mac installer to be per user instead of globally. It will cause other challenges, like every single piece of documentation talking about how to set up your path no longer working. But if we wanted to do something that's like short-term fixing, that's an option.
Or just recommend to use NVM. This is my personal favorite, but yeah.
I think there's a reality that there's a large portion of folks, especially who are getting started, that need an installer and aren't comfortable.
Yeah, I'm very happy. Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
Paulo has his hand up.
Yeah, also to consider there are other ways to install Node in macOS, for instance, Brew. Even with Brew, for instance, you have a different setup where you have a global folder, but it's actually accessible by any user, so it's another set of mess. Personally, I don't use NVM. I use N from TJ. So that's another way to set up Node. As you know, there are too many ways to do the same thing. That's the one issue for me. We should recommend one that we directly sponsor, probably as part of Node, because the thing is that we don't control any of these except our installers, which is a problem. Because, for instance, if any of this tool does versioning tool, I mean, does something that we don't control or we don't support, we are screwed. Having a local installer will be a mess because you have to set up the path, consider different edge cases for the user, will be a plenty another source of bugs. My take here is that we should probably work with the NPM team. Or actually, or is or not, I have to probably double check this. If we can switch priority to the paths that we checked, therefore the global module can be installed locally. And then we don't have this problem anymore, probably. But that's on package team, probably.
So I guess in terms of, do we want the TSC to take this on, somehow spin something up, or would we maybe transfer this issue over to the package maintenance team and ask them to take a look? I think from the last meeting, there's an interest there to help move it forward. So like, that's probably a reasonable ask, but it comes down to what the TSC thinks in terms of moving it forward. Okay, I see Matteo with a thumbs up, and I don't see anybody objecting. So like, if that's the case, I will, after the meeting, to transfer it over and put it onto the package maintenance team's agenda. Team, and like, we can keep an eye on, and if nothing happens, we can always pick it back up. Okay. Let's move on to the next issue. So there's CPC representatives, which is number 1504. I think that one I did see an issue which would switch Rich for Matteo. So I think we could actually close this one as there's an open PR, right? Okay, PR, open PR, switch. Which I will just do right now, so I don't forget. Right. Let's see, what else do we have here? Events, collaborator summits for 2024. I don't know, Matteo, if there's anything else you want to add, or Joey, you want to add on that one?
Register.
Sorry, can you hear me?
No, go ahead, Joey.
I landed the patch in V8 to make the snapshot reproducible. So hopefully that'll because I see there's an issue popping up in the build repo about the reproducibility. I'm going to backport that soon.
Joey, we were chatting about the summit, I think.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were talking about the strategic initiatives.
No, it's the summit.
Thanks for the update, but yeah, we're just anything else on this collaborator summit worth mentioning.
Okay.
So
just
I don't think I have anything else, Jerry.
So again, if you want to attend the session, as I said before, if you want to attend the session remotely, put your name in the issue, and which are on this repo is the OpenJS Foundation Summit. And here you go. Please put your name in one of the issues, so and your so that we know if you want to join remotely.
Okay, sounds good. So I think it takes us to like all core pack remaining issues. Just as a quick summary, I just want to say last time in the end of the discussion, we kind of had three things we thought we needed to move forward on. The first one was like, making sure we have consensus on that, the fact that there's no intention to remove NPM. And I think we do have consensus on that. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jeffrey, but the PR landed to document that.
About NPM?
Yeah.
Sorry? Yes.
Okay. So PR, so that's good. We made progress on that. The next one is like, should we block the core pack PRs based on the ask for more design discussion and NPM dev engines work? We haven't totally answered that question, but I think we did answer it in terms of there seems to be some consensus, or at least there was a suggestion that we don't need to rush on the decision to get things into 22. And so I think we have a consensus. I haven't heard any objections. So at least from the urgency level of 22, I think we've made progress on that. And then the last question that we had on the list was like the will node install links that enable binary scripts and so forth outside of node.js was sort of the third thing we said is like concrete next step. So I just wanted to add that as like context for what's changed since last week. And I'll say thanks to Jeffrey to help moving a bunch of that forward and as well as Antoine. Having with that context, some of the issues are like, we have one, which is exactly like add the policy for placeholder executables, and a number of others. I don't know, like, do people have a feeling of which issue we should dive into first in terms of like trying to move forward from where we're at?
I mean, if the answer to the placeholder executable one is no, then that like kind of short circuits most of the other questions. So that's kind of why I brought that up first. I don't know if we are ready to make a decision on that in the 20 or so minutes we have left. So if we're not, then maybe the best use of our time is just to like, if we can even agree on the process, like if we can agree on what questions we want to answer and how we want to settle them, whether it's the full TSC, a subset, the package maintenance team, something else. Or maybe we want to start with agreeing on a process and then remaining time we can see if we can agree on the placeholders question.
That sounds good to me. Does everybody agree that that's probably the next, like the key thing to push on now? Or is there something else that's sort of like top of mind that people are like, hey, we should try and make progress on that something else first? I think we'll take silence as, yeah, that's probably a good thing to. So in terms of the process, I guess like Jeffrey, you've already opened like a PR where there's been some discussion, right?
Well, I opened the one about the placeholders, but I just on Sunday night opened the one on the TSC repo with like what I think are all the questions that at least have come up. So maybe we decide we don't necessarily want to solve every single one of them, but if we want to be the most thorough, it would be answering all of these questions, and then we will have resolved all the outstanding questions related to Corpac. No one's commented on that, so I don't know. I mean, it's only whatever 48 hours old or so, but I could screen share it, or Michael, you want to bring it up, pull it up, but like,
yeah, no, you can. Why don't you do a screen share, and if people agree, we can.
If we have agreement on the questions at least, or we can at least use that as a starting point.
Yeah, I know. I think that like we'll want to keep 10 minutes, but let's use like the next 12 minutes to go through that. And I think that's the most like as opposed to looking at any of the other issues, let's go through that and see if we've got a way forward on those questions.
So it's here. I'll put the link in the chat. If I can find the chat now that I'm
Here, I'll put it in there. I
sharing.
think I had it open so you can get started.
Yeah, I mean, regardless of how people feel about the answers to any of these particular questions, do people think that these are the questions that need to be answered for Corpac? I guess we could start there. Or does anyone disagree that these are the questions that we need to answer?
I do agree that like a good discussion on placeholder executables is important. Like there's a lot behind that in terms of like what are we taking on as a project if we put those in. I think there's not necessarily agreement. Some people might say like we can put them in, and we don't take any responsibility for what we're linking to, like in terms of security vulnerabilities. Other people might say, hey, that's not actually gonna hold water. Like, if we put the links in, we're gonna have to like take responsibility. So I think it's a key one to like, what is it going to cost the project to do this in terms of cost versus, and you need that in the cost benefit. So personally, I think that's a key one to start with. Does anybody else have thoughts? Go ahead.
I don't think saying that we don't take responsibility for something we're involved with is actually going to work in practice.
That's where like, so go ahead.
I mean, that was kind of what I was getting at. It was like, that's key to everything. Like if we don't, if placeholder executables are just not acceptable in general, then the rest of this list goes away. Like then we're not enabling Corpac. So that's kind of why I thought of it as like the threshold question. But I mean, we can get into disagree with how I framed this or disagree with the idea of these are the questions, or does anyone want to say we should kick this to the package maintenance team or somebody else? I mean,
I see Paulo.
I feel like if we could try to settle that.
Yeah, Paulo. Did you ever have?
Yeah. No, actually, yes. I was thinking that the way Geoffrey structured the question looks fine to me, because to address your direct question. What I'm missing from the picture are actually two main questions. First of all, why Corpac is not considered to be ready eventually, but might not be considered ready to be enabled by default. That's my first question. And if we choose not to have placeholder executable, what is the purpose of having Corpac in Node at all in that case? Because I think that's a direct consequence, right? If we don't want executable, probably we don't even need Corpac inside that. That's my take there.
And Matteo had his hand up.
So for me, the question on the placeholder executable, it needs to essentially be split in, do we want to have the placeholder executables for other package managers? And the reason is these can probably have two answers for it. Mostly because we ship one and there are alternatives. So that have massive usage or massive fan base at least. So if we ship none, then will be something that would not be needed. Okay, like I would, it's if you wanted to ship, let's say we want to ship a build system. So, we ship placeholder executable for all possible. So we ship gulp, placeholder executable for gulp, I'll grant. So, yeah, that's it. So I recommend to split the two questions.
But I guess I don't.
They are split. If you look here, the first one is like, do we want to allow them of any kind? And then if we do sometimes want to allow them, then here, like, do we want to ship them for yarn and PMPM specifically, or other categories?
Yeah, I will invert it. I recommend like inverting the question. That's my recommendation here.
Well, I mean, if we don't allow placeholders of any kind, then we can't have them for package managers either.
Well, you can say that we don't want to have them for any kind, but with an exception for package manager.
Well,
I think that's covered like I guess you could say maybe like the first thing is, would we make an exception for yarn and PNPN? Like maybe putting that as the first question under like the first sub question.
Yeah. This is my
like we could say no generally, but and then it's like, well, would we make an exception for those? And like that might address Mateo's concern while leaving the structure pretty much the same.
I mean, whatever. That's these aren't numbered, so you can go through these in whatever order you want. So I think Paolo has his hand up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also have two other question that will make the portrait even more complicated. Sorry for that. But the first one is that if we allow placeholder executable, sorry, in general, we are messing with the same promise that we spoke a few moments ago about the global node modules, because we are going to have to handle with several, system in order to make sure that we can create a symlink or not symlink, because maybe eventually it's not supported. You get the idea. The second one, sorry, the thing that I was thinking is that so far we've only been talking about yarn and PNPM, but we all know that it's just a matter of time before a Rust-based package manager for Node comes out, and people will ask us to include as part of core pack. So we also should care about the policy of what is core pack considering, what are the rules for eventually accepting new package managers inside core pack, and therefore more placeholder executable and so forth. You see where I'm going. I think that's something that is not addressed by this list, and it's not even actually needed for the immediate future, but it's probably something we might want to consider.
I
Yeah,
guess the governance.
that's on here, somewhere.
The very last one, okay. Okay, so if you probably in the last one you also account for new eventually package managers to be included, that should also address my concern probably. But I mean, it's not for immediate discussion. It's just something we want to consider when discussing this.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these questions, I mean, the only types of placeholders we're considering right now are for package managers. So all of these questions like apply to placeholders for package managers. I didn't really go into, I mean, there could be other questions you might ask for like a placeholder for ESLint or a placeholder for TypeScript or something like that, that I didn't really bother to put in here because it's not on the table right now. So yeah, I guess you could almost, I could put in this question here, like if we allow placeholder executables in general, or this could even just say if we allow placeholder executables for package managers, then blah 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 blah, because those are the only ones we're considering. So all I meant was that this covers objections to placeholders that are like in the abstract, like security, which applies to whatever the placeholder is pointing to. Like it's not, it doesn't matter that it's a package manager versus ESLint or something else. So it's sort of like that threshold question of like, are placeholders acceptable as a pattern that we are comfortable with shipping? Like, are we okay with that? And then if we are, presumably then we want to use that pattern for package managers. I'm kind of assuming that follows because that's why we would be saying yes to it. But
So we
here,
only have
I'll just change this here.
We only have a few minutes left, so it sounds like some
There,
feedback for tweaking this, but like generally good. People could make some more specific comments in the issue. What my proposal would be is like, let's try and reserve most of the TSC meeting next week to dive in and have a discussion on that first point, about allowing placeholders. If there's already an issue open, like
It's this, I mean, this one is,
right.
I'd say this is the issue.
Right, okay. So like between now and next week, if people can, and as much as possible, start the discussion in there. Otherwise, we reserve next week's meeting modulo any like really important issues to spend discussing that and see if we can make progress, bring out the issues. Does that sound good to people?
I would
Okay.
make one request
ahead.
related to that. I'm happy to do that. I feel like this is the second time I've opened an issue for this, and or a PR for this. And the first time I got lots of comments about wordsmithing it and almost no comments about, do we want to, how do we think about what's being proposed here? Like, I almost don't care if the PR lands as long as it results in a decision, like if we don't want to put this in writing, that's fine with me. Somehow we should decide that we're reaching a consensus on something. I was kind of assuming it would need to take a vote, in which case then there needs to be a PR, hence the PR. But we could just see if we can reach a decision on, do we want to allow them at all and or allow them just for package managers, or never allow them? And if we could decide on that, then we can decide, like, if we want to put that in writing, what the best language is. But I would save the wordsmithing for after we've actually decided what we want. And like, if you want to debate this in the issue, that's great, but let's just debate like what we want rather than how we would put it in writing if we're actually going to formalize it, if that's okay with people.
I think that makes total sense. Like, don't nitpick the wording, actually comment on concerns or whatever, why, yes or no. And so Paulo has his hand up. I'm going to go to you, and then we got to close out. So we have
no, I will be very, very close. Geoffrey, I actually absolutely agree, because I've seen a lot of noise on that, on nitpicking the word. May I suggest to use discussion for that rather than issues, so people know that it's not actually a issue.
Matteo hates discussions.
It's always Matteo. Okay, I see.
It's impossible. I can't deal with them. I don't know how you folks do. I am. You can use discussion. Don't involve me. Don't involve me. I am not going to enjoy it.
Okay, so let's close out. We've got the issue. The ask is for people to discuss, like, try and put in your rationale as a plus or minus, like why you would support them, what your concerns would be. Like, I know what my concerns are. I would put them in, and we'll plan for a good portion of next weekly meeting to actually have the real-time discussion, which I think is going to be needed in part to move this forward. So thanks for everybody's sort of help and thoughts on that this week, and looking forward to getting into more detail next week. Thanks for everybody who's been listening on the live stream. We'll see you in GitHub and next time. And if everybody can stick around for